Devin Graves coming to you once again from Studio D with part 8 of my epic home recording series, Old School Production for the Modern Age. And today we're going to talk about probably the biggest obstacle in the home recording studio, which is the ability or lack thereof to record real drums. So you can't record real drums in your home studio. Well, there are ways around that, and we're going to talk about all of the different alternatives. First of all, I don't want to diminish the value of a great drum sample library. It's going to be an indispensable tool for any singer-songwriter, any home recording producer, any producer of any kind. Being able to lay out a drum map before you even start to lay down your guitars, creating your arrangements, this is going to be an excellent strategy. But if you want to have that perceived value in your music, you're going to want every musician's performance to be part of that record, not the least of which would be the performance of a great drummer. So there are basically three main reasons that recording drums in your home studio is a challenge. First, you don't have a drummer. Second, you don't have the infrastructure. Or third, real drums are stylistically inappropriate. Say if you're doing hip-hop or certain kinds of pop music, a real drummer isn't really going to be that critical. But when it comes to rock and metal in particular, a real drummer is going to be the engine that drives that car. That's going to be such a huge part of the personality of the band. If you're an excellent programmer, say you got some metal arrangement and you're a great guitarist and you program amazing drums and you make something that sounds killer, every time that anybody learns that that's not a real drummer, all of the sudden the value of what you've done is going to drop. Their perception of the value is going to drop. And think about it. John Bonham, Keith Moon, Ringo Starr, Danny Carey from Tool, Alex Van Halen. Each of these guys and so many others put an indelible stamp of their drumming style into the music and have become part of the legend of some of the most legendary bands in rock history. This wouldn't have been possible with a drum machine or drum programming. Maybe the songs would be great, but these drummers are really the heartbeat of a great rock band, the soul of a great rock band. So let's start with the infrastructure. You have a great drummer, but your drummer isn't going to be on your record. Really, rethink that. There are many ways you can get around this problem. The first thing you could do if you just don't have, say if you're in an apartment or something and you can't bring a drummer in there lest you get evicted, rent a studio. Just go to a studio for a couple of days, make sure the drummer is really well rehearsed, can do their parts, maybe even have the bass player record simultaneously to get that pocket, but at least record the real drums in a real studio. And if you do this, do it right. Right now, it's kind of a trend to go in and half-ass the drum recordings, go in there with shitty heads, not bothering to mic things really, really well, and hoping to replace it with samples later. Since they plan on replacing things with samples later, they figure, oh, the tone of the drums doesn't matter. I urge you, do not start that way. Put your best foot forward. Get the best drum sound you can. This is going to start with new drum heads, well-tuned. That's on the drummer, not on the studio. The biggest impact you can make on the sound of your drums is in the hands of the drummer and the sound of the drum set. No cracked cymbals unless that cracked cymbal is a sound you like. New heads, well tuned on a good drum set. Then it will be up to the engineer to capture that drum. Hopefully has a good room, hopefully knows where to put the mics. Get those drum tracks done somewhere else and then bring them into your studio and build from there. Or you can consider guerrilla recording. Find a location. Get a mobile rig together, an 8-channel interface. If you have more channels, a laptop. Bring what you have. Bring the mics you have. Hopefully you have at least a basic rudimentary set of drum mics. Find an old church. Find a kindergarten. Find a warehouse. Find a garage. Anywhere where you can set up. Acoustic treatment is going to be another issue. Maybe it's an issue, maybe it's not. It depends on the size of the room and where you record. But if you can just find a location that you don't have to pay for, you can always just set up some, makeshift moving blankets or anything to kind of deaden the slap or whatever you have to do. But just get it done somewhere, even record outside, anywhere you can get away with it. That's an option. Or e-drums. E-drums are an option. And e-drums also cover the option of, what if I don't have a drummer? Okay, if you're a singer-songwriter, you don't have a drummer, you want to put out a record, and you're considering programmed drums, well, it's at least a better step to play an E-kit. Have a drummer play an E-kit. At least you'll have a human performance. But there's a few cautions I have for you. If you're investing in an E-kit as a way to record drums at home, I want you to think this through, because I actually did this. For one, you want a good set with good mesh heads so that they have a good sensitivity. Now, if you have an E-kit, the brain of the E-kit is going to store the sounds, and most of the time, these sounds are not going to be adequate for your record. You're going to have far better sounds in your drum library, potentially, but you're also going to have the limitation of the speed of how this brain will trigger these samples. And when I got into the game about 5 years ago, the only brain that would ever have been recommended by anybody for this function would be something made by Roland. It almost doesn't matter which Roland. I used a TD12 or TD15. There's a TD20, a TD30, and all of these are excellent, super fast triggers, super adequate for triggering MIDI drum samples. The thing about the Roland is that the Roland itself, the brain itself, the sounds in the brain are super expressive because they are not samples, it's a synthesis. And they are sensitive to where you hit the drum, the proximity to the center or to the edge. You're going to get a change in tone, similarly to what you would get by playing an acoustic set. And the cymbals are also similar. But what you're going to find is these sounds are going to fall short sonically in the mix. They're not real drum sounds. They're not even real drum samples. They're synthesized. So if you're watching Thomas Lang playing these Roland drums, he's going to make them sound amazing. But if you drop this drum sound in a mix, if you compare it to what real drums sound like, or even what a sample library sounds like, there's going to be a big difference. So you're going to use this brain to trigger samples. And when you do that, you're going to run into more limitations. You're going to have on the snare maybe different velocities, maybe the center, maybe the rim. And the same thing for the toms. You'll have the toms just done at different velocities, and then you'll have a rim shot, like a side stick. The hi-hat you'll have closed, a stomp, half open, and full open. On a ride, you'll have the bell, the bow, and the edge. And the crashes, you'll just have different velocities of crashes. What you won't have is the infinite variables in between all of these points. If I were to sit at my rack, my drum set there, and hit my rack toms, I could play them in the center, closer and closer and closer to the edge. I can do rim shots where I'm hitting the rim and the drum simultaneously and get all these different sounds out of one single drum. or a ride cymbal. I could hit it anywhere between the bell and the edge with any part of the stick, and I can get all these different sounds to shimmer off that cymbal. And also when I'm hitting the cymbal, it's a natural continuing sound that you're going to hear the hits individually, but the sustain of the cymbal is just going to ring and ring and ring and ring, and it's going to grow and shrink. And if I'm using E-drum cymbals, every time I hit that cymbal, it's going to re-trigger a whole new cymbal tail. It could be convincing, but it's not the same. And with my crashes, I could also hit with the bell. I can hit with the edge of the stick, with the shaft of the stick, with the tip of the stick, and get all these different sounds, myriad different sounds from every part of the drum set. The drum set is arguably the most expressive instrument in the whole band because of this one reason, because there are so many ways you could hit it, so many different places you can hit it, with so many different techniques you could hit it, and the sounds are going to be different. So if I was just doing straight, kick snare patterns, backbeats, with just a straight hi-hat, then sure, an E-kit would do the trick and it would probably sound great. But the better the drummer, the less capable the E-set is of emulating a real drum set in play. And this is where you're going to be hard-pressed to find any great drummer that would prefer an E-kit over a real acoustic set for this very same reason. But let's say this is your limitation. Let's say, okay, you have to use an E drum set. A couple things I want to caution you on is you are likely to spend more time editing the performance than recording the performance. Getting the hits right, getting the velocities right, it's not going to trigger accurately every single time. And so you're going to do the take. It's going to sound great while you play it. Then you're going to listen back and you're going to hear deficiencies. Oh, this snare jumps way out, or this is way too quiet, or it just didn't trigger exactly how you expected it. And that's something that a real drum set isn't going to do to you. So you're going to spend this other pass editing these hits, editing the hi-hats, editing all the velocities to get it to flow. And this is going to be a big time-consuming thing. Another thing is the expense of an E-kit could easily exceed the expense of an actual acoustic drum set. I have a Drum Tech Diablo set, which had 3 toms and a certain snare drum, but I replaced the snare with a higher end snare, a 14-inch wooden snare, all with mesh heads, a 14-inch floor tom, an 18-inch kick drum. And at first I tried the E cymbals. I wanted to see how well the E cymbals would work. Those were the first things I ended up replacing. But that snare drum, for example, I spent about 400 euros on that snare drum. I could have easily bought any number of really good acoustic snare drums for that same money. Same goes for the floor tom. I spent about 5,000 euros on this E-kit. And for that money, I could have gotten an excellent acoustic set and drum mics. So be very careful how deep you get into this, because if you buy an E-kit, you're going to want the best E-kit you can get and try to get the best feel and something that looks cool, something that drummers might want to come in and play. But in that expense, you're going to exceed what it would have cost just to get a real drum set in the first place. So with caution. And finally, if you're just like me, a singer-songwriter with limited drum chops, an E-kit is an excellent way to learn. It's silent, so you're not going to disturb your neighbors. They usually have a USB input, so you can put in some MP3s and jam along with your favorite music, and you can actually come a long way and learn drums really, really quickly, and it's a lot of fun. Absolutely. But along the way, if you ever do make the transition to a real drum set, you might find that you've cheated yourself by developing bad habits. because you set the thresholds and the velocity levels on all your drums, and you get something comfortable to where your kick drum is giving you a lot of power with your strike. But what you find out is that same strike on a real drum set is anemic, and you realize you have to actually lean into it to get that sound. So you're not learning how a real drum set responds to the human touch. You're just getting the electronics to respond to the touch. And so, okay, you'll at least get a real performance of some type, but you will have problems transitioning to real drums if you stay too long on an E kit. What I found by far the weakest link of E drums is the cymbals, especially the hi-hat. I described the different layers you'll have, on cymbals, on the hi-hat. And as I said, the actual real acoustic counterparts are infinitely variable. And that is a layer of expression that you just won't get with an E kit, especially the skill of an excellent drummer, as I said. So what I would do is, the first thing I would do if I was planning to go this route, as a singer-songwriter, I would make sure to get myself a pair of drumsticks and some type of practice pad. And with that, go onto YouTube and learn drum rudiments. Practice them. You'll have your single strokes, your double strokes, paradiddles. Learn these from any source. My favorite drum instructor on YouTube is, I think his name is Rob Brown. Beat Down with Rob Brown. Excellent drummer, excellent teacher. Teaches you all about tuning the drums. You learn a lot from this guy. But in any case, whoever you pick, learn these rudiments and practice them. Practice them every day before you even pick up your guitar. Practice for 20 minutes doing paradiddles and single strokes and double strokes, and just get comfortable with it. And what you're training more than your hands is your brain. And once you start getting good at these things, and it doesn't take long if you do it diligently every day, even for a short amount of time every day, you get good at these things, and then all of a sudden you'll learn that playing a hi-hat with sticks is easier than programming it with your fingers, much more expressive. Then you get yourself an E kit, but don't spend money or time investing in the E cymbals. Don't spend a lot of money on one of those really good Roland hi-hats that open and closes. That's like 400 euros or something, $400. You could get an excellent hi-hat for that. You still have to buy the pedal anyway. So just get a hi-hat. I have one here. This one is a Paiste 2002 medium, 14-inch. And it's on an Iron Cobra, a Tama Iron Cobra stand. Very nice belt-driven stand, or it's chain-driven, I think. It's belt-driven. And it's a very good hi-hat. Now, the hi-hat is arguably the most important sound on the drum set. And the reason I say that is because you hear the hi-hat up to 4 times for every time you hear the snare or the kick. You're hearing that hi-hat more often than you're hearing any other drum. Second would be the ride. So buy yourself a real hi-hat, and if you can, buy yourself a real ride. You would probably even get away with recording them in an apartment bedroom, because it's not low frequencies coming out of these things, and it's the low frequencies, it's the kick and the boom that goes to the walls. The cymbals aren't much of a problem, so you could get away with it. Not sure always, depends on your neighbors, but you could get away with it. And if you program the drums and then you play the ride and the hi-hat over what you've programmed, that is going to fool the listener. That is where I can always tell real drums versus programmed drums, is basically on the hi-hat, the ride, and the cymbals. It's going to be a different world. And if you get good at these rudiments, It's going to be super easy for you to do that. One thing I would recommend is if you're doing 2-stick on the hi-hat, make sure you have that pad there that you can hit that pad, put a towel on it to make it more silent or anything at all. Put some acoustic foam onto it so it's not too loud. But make sure you're hitting that at the time you're hitting the snare so that you're not hitting the hi-hat at the same time you're hitting the snare, because that's just not what happens unless you have 3 arms. That's one little tip. But basically, you can build yourself a real set of cymbals. This is what I did. I had my E drum set, then I put real cymbals. I recorded a couple albums like that. And then eventually I moved Adil's Yamaha recording custom, the Dead Soul Tribe set. I moved it in here and put the E kit away. And, I've never looked back. Even I play this kit sometimes, and I thank the E kit for giving me the time to practice and get half competent at doing something simple. And I have songs where I'm actually playing real drums now. But more importantly, I have a real drummer like Adil come in and play these things, and I'm set. I'm good to go. Now, if you don't have a drummer and you don't want to invest in even an E-kit or what have you, rather than using programmed drums on your album, consider going on Fiverr and just hiring a drummer. Some of these drummers will play a song fully multi-tracked for, I don't know, $25, $30, euros. Some of them as much as 200 or more. You get what you pay for. Maybe somewhere in the middle you can find someone that's doing a really excellent job. Look through Fiverr, see what people are offering. But you could record someone like that again and again and again before you'd even pay for a set of drum mics or an E-kit or a real kit. Maybe you'd get a lot out of just kind of nickel and diming your way forward song by song, even auditioning different drummers, trying different things. Maybe you make a good partnership where you can get a good deal from repeat business. But there are drummers out there that already have invested in the infrastructure. They've already invested in their talent, and they don't necessarily charge that much to put their talent on your record. So you can certainly consider that before you put just programmed drums on your rock or metal album. Again, if you are doing hip hop or something where real drums aren't relevant, this is a non-issue for you. But I'm talking about where drums are an issue. Another thing you can consider, but this is weak, in my opinion, is drum loops. Now, drum loops are probably better than programmed drums because it is oftentimes an actual drummer playing actual drums. And if you can get individual multi-track drum loops, you can mix them well. It's just that you are going to be using the same thing that anybody else has access to, and you will lack the personality of an individual playing to your music. So I would say using loops is a great way to create a song. Using programmed drums is an excellent way to begin a song. You can, it's actually my favorite way to program drums first, play all the guitars and everything to the programmed drums. Then at the end, replace the programmed drums with real drums. The advantage to doing it that way is if you have the programmed drums in place, it'll better inform you on the guitar tones you want to use. That's going to fill the mix, the bass sounds, and so forth. You'll be able to fill it in accordingly. And then when you take those drums out and replace with real drums, your tones won't be fighting the real drums nearly as much. If you record your guitars to a click track or something, you could risk having too full of a guitar sound and then it doesn't sit well in the mix. So at least the electronic drums give you some sort of placeholder sonically for how your mix is going to sit. So it's always a good thing. And also, if you need to augment a drum performance later by triggering samples, you can use your sample library to do that. And that's all subject for another discussion. And If you can record your own drummer, there's going to be another chapter dedicated specifically to that craft, and we're going to get to that. So this is dedicated to people that either can't record drums or think they can't record drums. And hopefully this gives you some possibilities, some solutions, and some ways to think that might make it possible. Because again, I want to put the value back into music, and there's nothing that can do that like a good drummer. If you have any questions, any recommendations you'd like to know, or any recommendations that you have, anything that I may have missed, please put it in the comments below. Help other people out. Please like this if you liked it. Please subscribe. I want to grow the channel and I want to spread this out as much as possible because this is a lot of fun for me. And until then, till the next one, part 9, I will see you then.